Welcome back to the Business of Biotech. I'm Matt Pillar, and today we're visiting with Fountain Therapeutics, a company that's made quite a few moves since I first covered it back in 2020. Fountain just secured a healthy dose of funding under the relatively new leadership of CEO Dr. William Greene, who's leading the effort at Fountain to leverage AI and machine learning to identify novel biology around known targets and develop a pipeline of candidates with the big, audacious goal of reversing aging to treat disease. More specifically, the company's platform hones in on cellular biologic age and other potential cellular level risk factors for disease. On today's show, Dr. Greene and I will discuss Fountain's go-forward plan and how it's secured ongoing support from the likes of Eli Lilly, Alexandria Venture Investments, R42 Group, Khosla Ventures, and Nan Fung Life Sciences. Dr. Greene, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. So thanks again for joining us. And typically when I have a guest on, I like to kind of run through some of their background, get to know them a little bit better. And I thought rather than having me kind of prattle on through the chronology of your career, we'd walk through it together a little bit. And I'd like to kind of go way back here, Dr. Greene, and start with your academic years. You were a research scholar at Howard Hughes Medical Center while working toward your MD from UC San Francisco, and then a Robert Wood Johnson Clinical Scholar at Yale. And even when you joined industry with Genentech, it was in a clinical science research capacity. And then you maintained that academic tie for many years as an assistant clinical professor of medicine at UC San Fran. So I'm curious about that. You were so rooted in academia at the outset of your career. What motivated the transition from there to venture capital?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. I love medicine and love doing research, in particular neuroscience research and clinical epidemiology research during my academic career. I really wanted to bring those threads together: basic science, technology development, and clinical science, the ability to really understand how that could help patients. And I wanted to bring it together in a way where I could use that technology, use the advances being made across biology in the most impactful way possible to help as many patients as possible. And as much as I love taking care of patients one by one, the opportunity to do so at a cutting edge research institution, which Genentech was and is, to really accelerate bringing those advances to patients motivated me to go into industry.
Yeah. And then the move from industry into sort of the VC and entrepreneurial realm. What was the story there? It looks as though you were with MPM Capital, and that at some point segued into entrepreneurialism with the co-founding of Pear Therapeutics.
Indeed. So after several years at Genentech, I was given the opportunity to take everything that I learned about developing drugs across the spectrum from preclinical all the way through commercialization and apply it to broader set of companies and really help MPM to identify and invest in and effectively help companies putting therapeutics into development. That's a very common use of venture capital funding now, but MPM was one of the pioneers of that. And it was an amazing experience to be able to help a broad selection of drug and device companies at the very beginning and mid stages of their development to really develop best practices and speed development of their products. So it was in some ways a natural extension of my passion and what got me interested, and the ability to broaden and deepen the work that I did with those companies.
Okay. Today you're kind of doing double duty. You're CEO of Iconic Therapeutics and Fountain Therapeutics. Tell us how that came to pass and whether that's sort of a synergistic combination for you.
Personally, it is. It wasn't necessarily intentional. After 12 years at MPM, I was ready to be an entrepreneur myself, and as you mentioned, co-founded Pear Therapeutics, and also became employee number 2 and the first CEO of Iconic Therapeutics. That company has put compounds in the clinic, gotten clinical trial results, done big pharma deals, and in that sense is at one end of its life cycle as a venture-backed company. Fountain is a Series A startup with a discovery platform. So in that sense, it's a little bit like having children of very different ages. There's different experiences, different pieces of your brain and your body that you use to help and advance the cause each day. And they, in that sense, don't really overlap, but it's really awesome to be able to help both companies at those different stages of their development. It wasn't exactly intentional. Fountain, I was introduced to Fountain Therapeutics, and the opportunity and the science was so exciting that I didn't want to wait.
Mm-hmm. It is an interesting combination. Do you find yourself applying things that you're learning and seeing on the evolution of the more mature company to the younger company, to Fountain as you move along? Like, are you learning things with the more mature company that you can apply, I guess, day to day with the younger one?
Indeed, and also, frankly, the other way around too, in terms of motivating people and building teams. They're really unique companies with unique and quite different thrusts, but also different teams, different team dynamics, different technology needs. So I would say I'm learning from both.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I want to focus on Fountain. There's been some quite a bit of news coming out recently about Fountain. So you took the reins there just last year in 21. What precipitated that decision? What led to your appointment as CEO at Fountain?
I had been introduced to the company in the mode of an advisor and potential board member. This is a fantastic set of scientific ideas and experiments that had come out of Tom Rando's lab at Stanford. Tom was one of my mentors in medical school, and I followed his career closely as he has become a very leading stem cell and aging biology researcher. This company was developed out of his research and had some very audacious scientific ideas, which have been started to play out. And the founders and the board asked me to give some advice on how to now navigate the transition from pure, almost platform development and science development into a biotech company, a biotech discovery company. I signed on as an advisor, joined the board, and then in the spring, back in April, when the startup CEO moved on to a new venture, the board asked me to step in as CEO, and I was so excited that I said yes.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. When you were first exposed to the company, I'm curious about this because I don't mean to make any assumptions here, but I've had several conversations with companies such as yours and quite different from yours, but who are all focused on, or at least create a perception around solutions to anti-aging, and whatever I guess in whatever flavor that might fall. And at face value, I wonder if there was any concern on your part when you first learned about the company about just where the company wanted to take that direction. Because quite frankly, there's this there's sort of a precarious point between the consumerist perception of anti-aging and the solid real medicine behind cellular age and cellular repair and that kind of thing. So I'm just curious about your perception from the outset.
Well, it's a great question. I think in this field, an important question to ask about any venture. Mm-hmm. The early attraction to me for Fountain, as I mentioned, really is the set of founders and investors who put this company together. These are, in the colloquial terms, very serious people, very fine researchers who started this company because of a fundamental, deep understanding of what aging is at the level of cells and tissues in your body, what regulates that process, and the deep biology involved there. So in that light, this is a very serious scientific effort from the outset. And when I talked to the founders and the investors about where they wanted to take the company, it was very clear that they wanted to use this technology to understand better ways to treat serious diseases associated with aging, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
But aging per se is a normal process that we all undergo. The part that we all care about and should care about is healthy aging and aging without suffering from debilitating and fatal diseases. And these chronic diseases associated with aging, frankly, while they've gotten attention from the biopharmaceutical industry, we have scant effective therapies. And in fact, few therapies at all for chronic diseases such as dementias, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, the loss of effectiveness of our immune system as we age. And so these types of very serious diseases are where we think we can have an impact, and that effort drives us forward.
Yeah, awesome. So as you go out there, we're going to talk about some of the money that Fountain has raised recently. As you go out there and you do that fundraising, you're finding that the reception for what you're trying to do is perhaps warmed up a bit. I mean, it's a pretty good reception you're getting from the VC crowd.
Well, it's a great question. We certainly talked to and introduced the company to a wide swath of venture capital and private equity investors in the course of my coming into the company and raising the completion of our Series A financing. Mm-hmm. And it is often an early part of the conversation where, just as you asked, they say, well, what are you really about here? Are you trying to solve aging? Is aging a disease? What's your approach? And I think that once we make it clear that we're a biotech company and we're here to treat serious diseases with novel therapeutics, it just fundamentally puts the conversation in the right place.
Yeah, awesome. What was the company like when you came on board? Give us a flavor for what you found when you joined it, and what you determined, as its new leader, what you determined its greatest need to be.
So what I found when I joined was an amazing group of really dedicated young scientists who had taken some of the audacious ideas about how to develop a screening platform for drugs that can rejuvenate cells and reverse cellular aging out of the academic lab and reduced it to practice in a rigorous industrial lab setting. I also found an amazing culture where this company is about half data scientists and computational biologists and half laboratory-based cell biologists. And unlike some efforts where those sorts of scientists speak their own language and operate a little bit in isolation, the culture at Fountain has been from the beginning one of intense collaboration and deep sharing and creativity between all the scientists. So the cell biologists are suggesting computational approaches to their data, and the data scientists are really informing the kinds of experiments the cell biologists do. So I was really gratified to see that really exciting culture of deep collaboration, real intellectual excitement, and real mutual respect for what each of the team members brought to the table. Having said that, this is very much a startup, a very early stage startup. Young, plucky scientists. And the biggest need I saw was twofold. One, and they're connected. One, to bring in a cadre of executives with real biotech industry experience to help grow the company into the vision of being a discovery and eventually development company. And two, bringing focus to the strategy around getting drugs into the clinic. And that's what we've spent the last 8 months doing.
Yep. All right. So quick follow up on that, on the people angle. Just in mid-January, I saw that the company announced that it brought in a veteran business development officer, chief business officer, and a new Hoey. So she's your new CBO. Was that a strategic appointment for you at this juncture in the company's, I guess, chronology?
Absolutely. We will be, over the course of the year, making several senior hires. We've made some scientific hires, but we'll also be making several senior executive hires. It is not an accident that the first of those is a chief business officer. Mm-hmm. This company has tremendous opportunity in a broad range of potential disease states and indications. And as I said, one of the most important things we have to bring here is focus to the discovery and development effort. Anu will be my partner in bringing that focus and also in introducing the company to biotech and pharmaceutical partners who may want to work with us and work with parts of our platform or to help us develop our platform in specific disease areas.
Okay. I do want to learn about the fundraising effort and what your plans are there, but I'm gonna bounce around a little bit here because I think that's I think there's a fitting kind of segue to the platform itself. I want to tackle that first, just so we're clear on what exactly it is you guys are doing and looking to do. Now, I covered Fountain back in 2020, and at the time we had a nice discussion. I think we did a write-up for Bioprocess Online about the philosophy, the approach behind an AI-driven, target-free, hypothesis-free drug discovery related to anti-aging. That was the company's mantra at the time. So tell us about that, whether that's still the case, still the thrust of the company, and just what exactly that means.
It certainly is. So to take a small step back, mm-hmm. Much of drug discovery follows the following sort of pathway. A potential drug target is identified in academic or industrial labs, often though out of basic research in academia. And that biologic target, that protein or that receptor or that pathway looks interesting, is studied, and seems maybe to have a role in certain diseases. And then over time, a pharmaceutical or biotech company explores that target and sees if so-called drugging, if inhibiting it or in some cases enhancing it could help with disease. And sometimes that works. And when it works great. It really works well when you know the enemy. When you know, for example, an infectious disease, when you know the pathogen that you're trying to inhibit, you kind of know how to attack it. Or and even to some extent in cancer, when you know what the cancer cells are doing, you can imagine several ways to inhibit those cells or kill those cells. The problem with chronic diseases of aging is they take time to develop, and it's not clear necessarily exactly what the steps are in the development of that disease. So picking a target and assuming that is going to be the right one is a little bit like drilling for oil by drilling one hole in the sand and hoping you strike gold. Mm-hmm. Our approach rather surveys the entire landscape of cells as they age and asks, can we intervene? Can we reverse the loss of vibrancy, the loss of resilience of cells to the various slings and arrows associated with aging? And if we could, then we're able, in essence, to turn the light on the whole field and not just drill individual holes. So we think that we'll have a much more efficient way to find multiple new ways that we can intervene in the chronic diseases of aging without having to know which target we're going after at the start.
Right. Can you share with me? I don't remember off the top of my head. I remember having a discussion at the time about some of the metrics, volume that the company was capable of in terms of screening. Is that something that perhaps has grown? Can you share any kind of, I guess, characteristics around the volume you're able to handle?
Certainly. Of course, we started with 0, and rapidly got to a place where we could do about 10,000 individual tests a month. We've massively increased that. We're up to 30,000 tests a month now, and we think there's no reason that we can't increase that exponentially. Some of that is just building lab capacity, and some of it's building efficiency, robots, et cetera. Yeah. Those individual tests, those individual perturbations, if you will, are an important metric. The other metric that's quite important for any screening company is, can you screen compounds? And does that yield so-called hits that could be followed up? We started with a very small set of molecules that we were able to screen in our platform, and then got to a place where we could screen an 8,000 compound library, and found that we had a couple hundred interesting hits that we've then prosecuted in animal models, and actually got some potential leads from that. We've since scaled that up and just completed a 50,000 compound screen with proportionally more material to work with, and potential drug targets to explore. And we think the next step would be to scale up from there too.
Yeah. Is Fountains, is that technology and that capability dedicated to Fountain, or was there, or will there be at any point the opportunity to license that technology to partners to help their discovery and target acquisition efforts?
Well, we think that the fundamental engine is ours. There's intellectual property around that, but a lot of know-how. We've done a lot of work to build age classification systems for primary cells. It's different than trying to image other sorts of cells. It's different than some of the other approaches to so-called phenotypic drug screening. And we think that's a real important piece of our know-how. So I think we'll keep that technology ours. Having said that, we're very interested in partnering with companies that have specific interest in certain disease areas or biologic systems to understand better how their candidate molecules may or may not work, and of course to discover novel targets and molecules with them. So absolutely partnering with other companies. Licensing the engine itself, right now we think that's what we're focusing on internal.
The Business of Biotech is brought to you in partnership with Cytiva. Together, we're committed to helping the leaders of new and emerging biopharma companies navigate the financial, organizational, human resources, and regulatory waters you'll encounter on your way from discovery to the clinic and beyond. Check out a host of useful resources for biotech leaders at Cytiva's Emerging Biotech Accelerator at cytivalifesciences.com/emerging biotech. That's CYTIVA lifesciences.com/emerging biotech. Cool. All right, cool. So the volume is certainly impressive. And I understand, I think as well as anyone, that the ability to fail fast, fail cheap is an advantage in this business. But at the same time, you can't really build a pipeline, as a bad analogy, but you can't really build a pipeline. Well, you can't make a movie that is out of film that's hit the cutting room floor, right? So you can't necessarily build a pipeline out of the stuff that you're oh so efficiently knocking off. So tell us how the platform has progressed to the point where you've got a pipeline to build. Where are we now in terms of developing candidates?
Yeah, excellent analogy, and you're absolutely right. Have to fail fast and have to fail cheap in order to focus on what may actually create value and be helpful. So, as I mentioned, for example, the 8,000 compound library that we screened, the vast majority of those compounds weren't, at least to us, interesting in the sense that we're interested in, but a couple hundred were. And what we did, excuse me, and what our process looks like is we requalify each of those potential hits, and that find dose response and things like that, all what we call ex vivo, all on plates using imaging and robotics. So that's quite efficient. But then we got to a series of compounds that really were interested in. And the next question is, how interested are we? Could these have a role to play? And there is where, in general, animal work comes in, and in particular for us, where animal work comes in. And what we've done is developed and adapted a mouse model of accelerated aging so that we can actually somewhat efficiently screen compounds in mice that are born normal, but over a period of less than a year, in fact, over a period of just a few months, age across the entire lifespan of a mouse. In essence, we're modeling 80 years of human aging in 6 months. And in particular, we can, by treating mice with so-called progeria for a month, we can actually discern whether our potential drugs are affecting the organs and organ systems that are affected by diseases of aging. So that's a way that we can, again, in an unbiased way, screen out and in compounds in live animals. And we've done so, and we've further reduced our set of hits to really now a tractable handful of molecules that have real impact on real organ systems in real living animals. And we're pursuing now looking in traditional models of specific diseases for specific organs to shuttle each of these compounds towards what hopefully could be a development candidate and development path for them. So absolutely, we're always looking to winnow out potentially interesting molecules, but not ones that are having a profound effect, and then focusing on the pipeline that we'd like to try to build.
Yeah, it's certainly unique, to go in with this, hypothesis-free, target-free, unbiased approach to discovery, and it's unique, and it's I applaud it. At the same time, it presents challenges, I would think, from a business standpoint. Like when I think about a new Hoey's role, right, as chief business officer. Well, what markets are we going to address? What very specific patient populations or patient needs? We'll let you know when we get the hit. Like, that's a challenging place to be, right? There's got to be some challenge there. So I guess, how do you reconcile that? As the leader of the business, how do you reconcile, like, knowing you're doing good work, but not quite knowing where to stick that pin on the map just yet?
Right. So you're absolutely right. Building this executive team is all about building that focus and making choices. Our guiding principle, is that we want to treat serious chronic degenerative diseases of aging. There's a wide variety of those, but we know that there are areas we want to focus on. We want to focus on neurodegenerative diseases, immune senescence, metabolic diseases, et cetera. And how we develop and how we choose is integral to both our internal efforts and our business strategy. So we will develop internally some compounds for certain diseases, and we're likely to partner with with maybe more than one larger specialist for certain areas that they're particularly interested in, particularly adept in. And that's where the business development strategy comes in early. Will we, for example, do an exclusive partnership in immunology, or an exclusive partnership in neuroscience or cardiovascular disease? The answer is maybe. And that is how we can have both breadth and depth.
Yep. Excellent. Good. Well, I put you on the spot with that one. You did a great job answering it. So I want to shift gears a little bit and again, share the news around your 15 million Series A2 financing in Q4 of 2021. Bringing, I think, that total to somewhere around 26 million. I want to learn what that is, what the strategy is for that money, what that's earmarked for, and then have a discussion around how you got it. What the strategy was to get that money lined up. So let's start with, it's probably a good segue from the platform to the money. You could go either way, but how are those two things connected? What are you going to do with the platform?
Great question. So yes, our total Series A funding now is about 26 million. That's been capped off by our $15 million Series A3 close. And in that close, we brought in Alexandria Ventures, R42, and Eli Lilly joined. Mm-hmm. So having a major pharmaceutical company support us and invest in us was, again, quite intentional and points the way to our future strategy, which is we're very interested in partnering with pharma companies. We think there should be broad interest in this type of approach and in this platform. And we will be looking to introduce the company to further companies over time. The intent of extending the Series A financing was to both broaden and deepen the effort. So broaden the platform to make sure that we can address multiple sorts of scientific questions, and deepen it to achieve and build our first development candidates. They won't be in the clinic yet, of course, but to get the first molecules off the platform declared as development candidates.
Mm-hmm. The Eli relationship that you mentioned, so I'm familiar with, I think it was back in 2019, 2020, correct me if I'm wrong, you were, Fountain, that is, was invited to become a member of, I'm not sure if that's the right terminology, but to join Eli at its Gateway Labs facility, which is an honor. You know, it was a unique and cool opportunity for Fountain. Is there a connection there between that participation in the Gateway Labs community and the financial stake that Eli has taken in Fountain more recently?
I'm not sure there's a necessary connection, but certainly the opportunity to build the next stage of the company within the premier incubator space that Lilly Gateway Labs presents was fantastic and has been really meaningful to us. It's a terrific environment. Scientifically, it's terrific facilities. And Lilly has been quite open about the fact that this is not merely a real estate play for them. It's strategic. They choose which companies to grow within their incubator ecosystem and facility to be ones that they're potentially interested in. So while there's certainly no necessary connection, what's been great is the opportunity to meet folks at Lilly, including quite senior scientific staff, give them a good look at what we're doing, and be able to pick their brains as well. And building that relationship ultimately is what led to them being the first pharma company to invest in us.
Yeah. I'm curious, as I mentioned from the outset, when we were talking about your background, you spent quite a bit of time in VC before stepping into a founder's role and leading a biopharma. How is this, one, I guess, how did your experience on the VC side inform your fundraising strategy as, a CEO at Fountain? And two, tell us about the, I guess, nuance, if that's the right word, between raising VC funding and this pharmaceutical partnership like that which you've demonstrated with Eli. Compound question, I know.
Yeah, no, interesting questions. So with respect to moving from being a venture capitalist to being an entrepreneur, it is, I recognize, in some ways, it's a little bit swimming upstream in that often people who are successful CEOs can become venture capitalists. I had the opportunity to learn the ins and outs of funding companies, growing companies, seeing lots of failure modes and some success modes too, and bringing that to my work as a founder and as a CEO. Every company is different, every situation is different, and yet there are patterns and there are things to pay attention to: building the team, financing and building budgets for sustainability, setting achievable goals that will create financeable value. And so I certainly tried to learn those lessons and have brought those lessons to my work in small companies. And to your second question about the difference between raising money from venture capitalists and from pharma companies. In some ways, it's all the same. You want to articulate what you're doing. You want to be able to explain it. You want to communicate the excitement and the potential value around it. Having said that, one of the things that is different is that venture capitalists are looking at a very wide variety of projects and companies and have to make relatively quick decisions with the information available. And they're balancing lots of needs and lots of considerations in building their individual portfolios. Whereas, and they have to do that, it's pretty challenging. They have to do it in a compressed time frame. They have lots of resources to get input, but at the end of the day, they have to make choices often between really interesting companies. They're just doing very different things. They can't invest in everything. Talking to pharma companies is sometimes a little more focused and very often is over a more extended time period. I mean, Lilly's known about us, as you noted, for over a year and a half before we really started talking about an investment from them. And they had an opportunity to really get to know us, to get to know people, to get to quiz us at a very senior level on both sides of the table about the development of our science and where we want to take it. So they can go really deep. And of course, pharma companies, as broad as they are not looking at the universe. Each pharma company has its therapeutic areas of focus. And no one company is looking at everything, trying to do everything at once. So in that sense, every company is a little narrower and a little deeper, maybe a lot deeper. And that's just a different conversation.
Yeah. There are a lot of different scenarios, different models, and variations of models in partnership between emerging bio and large bio or big pharma, whatever you want to call it. What kind of, if you can share some color or commentary around what sort of strings, if any, are attached to that support from Eli? I mean, obviously it's not it's not necessarily, you wouldn't call it a licensing deal or even a partnership, perhaps. Is it just a straight up investment, or are there expectations around milestones and products and where the company's going that Eli will kind of get a piece of?
Great question.
Fair question, is it?
Yeah, fair question. Sometimes these things aren't public, but I can tell you in this case, the strings associated are the strings that any investor has. We have to hit our milestones. We have to actually use the money for what we said we were going to use it for. And hopefully we have to succeed. Beyond that, this is not a business development deal. This is an investment. Lilly is invested because they want to see us succeed, and they are there to help us succeed as a company broadly. Certainly, we've got great ongoing dialogue with them, and it creates real opportunities to have business development discussions. But that was not a business development discussion. That's an investment decision. They are supporting a variety of companies in a variety of strategic and adjacent to strategic areas for them. And we're one of them.
Excellent. Good. Okay. More generally on fundraising and financing, over the course of the past 2 years, a solid 2 years now, since the beginning of the pandemic, I haven't had a conversation with a fundraiser, a biotech fundraiser, or venture capitalist for that matter, that hasn't included some semblance of conversation around the challenges of raising money during a pandemic. Now, I don't know, maybe 2 years into it, maybe that's not the challenge it once was. Maybe we're all just used to raising money on Zoom. I don't know. But I'm curious, what would you kind of classify as your biggest challenges during these fundraising rounds? And, whether COVID or not, did COVID kind of, the pandemic, play into the strategy and the challenge you faced?
Well, it certainly did, just as it's played into the challenges that all of us globally have faced in everything we do. There's no doubt. This was a financing done entirely virtually. Mm-hmm. Every meeting was on Zoom. There were literally no in-person meetings. So what did we learn? I think, like all other biotech companies and other companies seeking financing, it's possible to do. You can raise money from people that you've never met in person on Zoom. Having said that, it's always harder. There is something ineffable about being in the room with someone, being able to read all the cues, get all the subtleties of questions, be able to really gauge when you're answering a question, whether it's landing the right way or to maybe shift focus a little bit. It's harder. And I think it will never not be harder. So it is a challenge. It felt challenging. There's opportunities too. If you fly to a city to meet a VC, maybe you can meet two on that trip. When you're doing it on Zoom, you can multiply that by 5. So it's efficient. It's also exhausting in a different way. In some ways, it's less wear and tear on your body not to be on a plane for 6 months. But on the other hand, it's exhausting in a different way to be on Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting. Of course, I think everyone who does this can relate to that, whether they're raising money for their biopharma company or just getting through a day working. It's a different sort of exhausting. It's a different sort of challenge. So, but we did it. We definitely did this entirely virtually.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. One of the things I was thinking about as you were talking about the different environment, the different sort of fatigue, like when you're on the road in that hotel, and you're leaving the hotel to have multiple meetings, perhaps while you're on the road. Yes, physically demanding, but there's like the downtime walk in a new environment, right? Like you don't get to do that over Zoom. If you want to take a walk between Zoom meetings, you're walking the same streets you've been walking for since you bought your house. It's an interesting point. And one that I fully understand. So when this drops, will be I don't know, a month or two removed from like the JP Morgan show, for instance. Did you take any of the virtual JP Morgan show back in January?
We did a little bit, but given that we had just completed our financing and we're just gearing up to hire the senior executives team, we did not do a frenzied JP Morgan outreach. We've introduced ourselves to a wide variety of investors, and over the next 6 months, we'll be in a more perhaps rational way, reaching out to additional potential partners, large and small. But we did take some meetings, and it's different. Certainly in past years, both as a venture capitalist and as a CEO, those 4 days of JP Morgan have been nonstop craziness with lots of convening and lots of good things happening, lots of efficiency. In that sense, frankly, JP Morgan felt a lot like every other day, a variety of meetings with a variety of different people, all on Zoom.
Yeah, which could be a problem for JP Morgan. I mean, long term, that's not the vibe that they've created, right? The culture that they've created. I'm sure that they'll love to get back to at some point. Do you think it will? Do you think we'll? I mean, I know it's a great big wide open question, but do you think we'll get back there?
Well, I'm hopeful, actually. I think both because JP Morgan's a great meeting and because convening is important and being able to meet people is important. So I hope so. We'll just have to see how things go over the next several months.
Yeah. And I guess I meant that question beyond the context of just JP Morgan. Will we get back to the point where we can, do a road show?
I feel like we have to. Again, while it is possible to do this way, everyone I talk to, literally, even the most introverted person, yearns to be able to do in-person meetings, at least some, and at least for some purposes. People have asked me, and I've been on various roundtables, what does the future of the office look like? What does the future of lab-based, biotech look like? It certainly feels like there's been a tectonic shift, and some sort of hybrid mode will almost certainly be the rule going forward. We've learned that we don't have to have people sitting in chairs to get work done. That's good. On the other hand, we know that there's something special about being together, both for internal team building and for external meetings. So I feel like we have to find a new normal that accommodates that intensely important human interaction part of business, as well as everything else we do.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, a couple last quick questions in the waning time that we have here together, Dr. Greene. I know we're running short on time, and I appreciate all the time you've given me. But let's put a bow on the fundraising aspect of the conversation by allowing me to ask you for your advice. The advice that you would give, that is, emerging biopharma leaders who are in the same context, raising money in this environment.
Well, the first is there's really never been a better time to be a biotech company. There's quite a bit of capital. There's established and new investors, often with specific foci, sometimes just general foci, who really want to see this industry grow and are driving the industry forward. So there's capital, and a lot of really interested people, curious, smart people who want to hear about what you're doing. Having said that, the first dollar is the hardest to raise, and really paying attention to having a story that leads somewhere, a story that leads to value creation as therapeutics or diagnostics or devices, whatever it may be, and being able to articulate that story. And then finally, there's no doubt that the most successful investors invest in successful teams. Technology comes and goes. All programs are challenged at some point. All intellectual property is imperfect at some point, no matter how perfectly conceived or brilliantly developed. And thus, the difference between success and failure often, usually, in fact, is what a team does with the hand that they're playing. So building your early team to have great people who are dedicated and cohesive is something investors will always take note of and will want to support over time, as well as make that initial investment. So first dollar is the hardest. Build a good team and have a compelling reason for them to invest.
Yeah, I like it. My frequent guest, Alan Shaw, who I have on to discuss capital markets and investment strategy quite frequently, he always says, investors look for, they bet on the jockeys, not the horses. So that definitely corroborates with what you're saying. And he also says that, there have never been so many hands reaching out for money, and there's never been so many hands doling the money out as the markets we're in right now. But you can't take that for granted. You can't, I almost feel like we hear that so often, you just expect it to be there, but the message has got to be on point.
Oh, for sure. And all markets have cycles, and I think no one should assume that if something felt slightly less challenging at one moment in time, that it will always be, quote, easy. I think capital is always limiting and always limited. And the stewards of that capital are very thoughtful about how they deploy it, and should be.
Yep. So what's your next big move as leader at Fountain Therapeutics?
We will continue to build the senior executive team. We're launching a couple of important searches now. And we will continue to both expand the breadth of the platform and drive our molecule development to the point where I hope that we'll have 1 or 2 compounds declared as development candidates over the next year.
Awesome. We'll be paying attention. I'm going to follow along on the journey, and hopefully we'll have you back on the show at some point to discuss progress.
Thank you. It'd be a pleasure.
Well, I appreciate your time today, Dr. Greene. Thanks for joining me.
Great to talk to you too. Thank you.
So that's Fountain Therapeutics, Dr. William Greene. I'm Matt Pillar, and this is the Business of Biotech. We're produced by Bioprocess Online in partnership with Cytiva, which offers the Biotech Accelerator at cytivalifesciences.com/emerging biotech, built for the leaders of new and emerging biotech. Check us out and sign up for my newsletter at bioprocessonline.com. And if you're enjoying the pod, please subscribe, give us 5 stars. And as always, thanks for listening.